With a vision of providing quality education to students of various strata of the society, the founding stone of Tuljaram Chaturchand College, Baramati were kept in the year 1962. The college has been formed with the efforts of numerous people.
Our society is a religious minority institute, and we thrive well with the preamble of Siddhir Nekantam, means knowledge from all the dimensions.
119 विद्यार्थ्यांना कॉलेज सुरू झालेलं. आज जवळजवळ 12,000 विद्यार्थ्यांना पोहोचलेलं आहे. हे कॉलेज ग्रामीण भागातलं सगळ्यात मोठं कॉलेज म्हणून आज गणलं जात आहे.
The college is affiliated to Savitribai Phule Pune University.
We are willing to empower the youth to skill and career-oriented educational and vocational programs so that he will be full-fledged for grabbing the opportunities for his career.
The college has well-qualified team of experienced teaching staff who are always ready to help, assist, guide and motivate the students. Regular meetings are conducted to keep a track of the development of the students and to plan new activities for their growth. Providing various streams of education under one roof makes Tuljaram Chaturchand College a renowned academic institution. With such numerous courses being provided in the college, the administrative department continuously and promptly maintains a smooth flow of activities in a well-managed manner. The college focuses on imparting career-oriented quality education at par with global standard. The senior college offers 3 streams: Arts, Commerce and Science. The college offers 22 different courses for graduation as well as post-graduation in various departments like Geography Department, Psychology Department, Yoga Department, Bachelor of Vocation Program of UGC in 2 disciplines, Food Processing and Post-Harvest Technology and Journalism and Mass Communication. The college has well-equipped laboratories where students under the guidance of their professors learn and conduct various experiments. The Electronics Department in the research arena. The Botany Department had set up their own botanical garden. Well-equipped biology labs. IT Department has well-equipped computer lab with Wi-Fi internet facility where students can develop their computer science skills. The classrooms are well designed with projection facilities and the students are encouraged to have better understanding of their subject with friendly interaction with the teachers. The college campus is built with a central library which has a huge setup of numerous books of various streams. Student can access the library and read on various subjects to gain an in-detail knowledge. There is a reading hall adjoined to the library where the students can peacefully study and take note on various topics of their interest. If a student wants to get some additional information on this subject, TC College also provides an internet cafe. The college has a huge auditorium, Jivraj Sabhagriha, with all the modern facilities, where around the year numerous events and functions are conducted for cultural educational growth of the students. Along with academics, The college has given equal importance to physical development of the student by providing innumerable sports activities like volleyball for boys and girls, kabaddi, basketball, boxing for boys and girls. The college has trained and developed some great sports persons who have won remarkable awards on various national and international platforms. The college provides NCC training where the cadets are given basic military training in small arms and parades. The cadets are well trained and given preference over normal candidates during selections. The officers provide good training and discipline education to the students. The NSS activities are conducted by the students like street plays to bring awareness in the society. Plantation, construction of bunds and many others. And for these activities, the college has received various recognition and awards for their contribution towards society. Since 41 years, the college has been organizing a Moropanth elocution and debating competition every year, which is a state-level competition. The college publishes an annual magazine called Anekant to motivate the creative skills of our students by providing a platform where they can publish their poems, articles and their opinions.
या संस्थेची प्रगती करत असताना आम्ही MBA कॉलेजची नवीन बिल्डिंग बांधली. अनेकांत इंग्लिश मीडियम स्कूल म्हणून नवीन बिल्डिंग बांधून त्या ठिकाणी सुरुवात केली. या ग्रामीण भागामध्ये हे कॉलेज सुरू होत असताना इथल्या मुलींची निश्चितपणे एक चांगल्यापैकी व्यवस्था झाल्याशिवाय राहणार नाही. कारण सहसा मुली बाहेरगावी पाठवायला पालक तयार नसतात. पण हे कॉलेज सुरू झाले म्हणजे त्या मुलींना चांगले शिक्षणाचं दार उपलब्ध करून देण्यासारखं होईल.
स्त्रियांच्या आरोग्यावर शिबिर आयोजित केली जातात.
The college also fulfills its social responsibility by conducting various events of awareness and confidence building in women. And to build a healthy environment, it also conducts the activity of plantation. The institute has also received various government funds for its welfare and further development.
Our institute is NAC re-accredited with a B grade. Also, we have undergone ISO certification 9001. The college has received the funding for DST Physics program. The institute is recipient of Star College status from DBT.
The college has also got various funds like College with Potential for Excellence and has won many recognition and awards in various fields.
We are seeking that the student should be at the excellence at par, not only in academics but in other activities like sports, competitive career, as well as the vocational skills.
The teaching department over here is very much friendly. We have a library which includes books from all the streams.
We have achieved many prizes of national and state level.
The college has boosted our confidence. The computer science department of a college has well-equipped laboratory.
The teaching staff here is good at transforming student attitude and creating better individuals.
The days are not far ahead that this institute will be a benchmark not only in Maharashtra or India but at the global scenario.
This is the journey of Tuljaram Chaturchand College, where it has enriched and nurtured hidden talent of students from various strata of the society and transformed them into confident and responsible citizens to excel in all walks of life.
Good morning to all and welcome to the second session of this international webinar. Yesterday we had 4 speakers. The first speaker was Dr. Mugdha Yevlekar, and she spoke on what is religious studies, relevance of religious studies in humanities and social sciences. Then Dr. Swasti Bhattacharya, she spoke on Vinoba Bhave, Sarvodaya and Cultural Humility, Religious Studies and Ethics. Then Dr. Niranjan Kaur Khalsa Baker spoke on Teaching Sikhism and Jainism, Ethnographic and Engaged Learning Approaches to Religious Studies. And the fourth speaker was Dr. Margaret Marion Gower, who spoke on Theology and Religion on the value of interdisciplinary research and critical thinking in humanities and social sciences. Now, the first speaker for today's session will give his talk. Let me introduce Dr. Manish Dabhade. He is Assistant Professor at Center for International Politics, Organization and Disarmament, School of International Studies, JNU, New Delhi. He has 18 years of teaching experience, and the areas of his interest are diplomacy, history, theory and practice with special reference to India, great power politics, India's foreign policy and contemporary politics in India and Maharashtra. Now Dr. Manish Dabhade will talk, and the title of his talk is The COVID Effect.
I'm very happy to join this international webinar on the post-COVID world system organized by the Department of Political Science, Tuljaram Chaturchand College. And I really want to thank Professor Hanumant Phatak and Dr. Kailash Mante for organizing this very timely webinar on a very important topic. And as you are all aware, I will be talking on diplomacy, the COVID effect. Basically, I have divided my presentation into 2 parts. First part obviously is dealing with overall the COVID impact on diplomacy, on how diplomacy is being carried out. And the second part obviously focuses on the Indian aspects. How did it affect India, and how did India respond? So these are basically the 2 parts of my presentation. And let me begin by making a few basic arguments to begin with. And I firstly see COVID principally making and even marking a disruption of sorts for diplomacy, but it actually did not lead to the end or the demise of diplomacy, as was predicted when COVID hit us all. Coming to India, the principal point I'm making, the argument I'm making, is that India in fact emerged as the global health security provider, obviously with the PPAE, the hydroxychloroquine tablets, and now vaccines being exported to different countries. The basic point which I'm trying to maybe highlight in my presentation is that COVID in fact illuminated the deeper strategic trends that were all there, but became clear and visible for all only after COVID struck us all. COVID-19 virus, also called Chinese virus for obvious reasons, or Wuhan virus, surely came as a shock, but actually should not have surprised us all, because the world did see Ebola, the world did see H1N1, and obviously SARS. So what really COVID did was it definitely affected and disrupted all levels of human interactions. They can be political, personal, economic, social, international, and of course diplomacy, which I'm going to talk about. And obviously COVID really changed the ways in which states conduct relations amongst themselves. In fact, the debate now is what exactly is the world of COVID. to what is going to be the world after COVID. So, in fact, what we are witnessing now is the so-called new, within quotes, post-COVID world order seems to be arriving. So, debates now are on its form, its shape, features, fault lines. So these are the larger contours of the debates which are now, which we are all seeing on the COVID issue. India, obviously, many of us would remember the 2020 last year began with a big bang of sorts, with President Trump coming to Motera and inaugurating what is now the Narendra Modi Stadium. But after a virus hit us all, states literally locked their gates, not just internally, but also externally, very importantly. Vaccines now are taking back all of us to a normal, but again, it is not going to be the pre-COVID normal. It is going to be a new normal. It is a new normal. So, COVID crisis in some ways was an opportunity to press the pause button, and also a reset button of sorts, not just by individuals, but surely and definitively the states also. So what I would be also talking about is how did really COVID impact on the larger debates on a number of issues, which indirectly and in fact directly also impacted on diplomacy. So in terms of the diplomatic agenda, COVID definitely, as I said, and which all of us would agree, disrupted many. It's a story of disruption. It's a story of transformation, and it's a story of innovation. This whole COVID effect on international relations and slash diplomacy. So what basically first we are seeing is that the major axes of divide in terms of discourse, in terms of narratives, in terms of critical questioning were about globalization. Globalization, especially after the end of the Cold War, was seen to be a given, was seen to be a normal. But I think with COVID, there are now questions on globalization. At some level, we are also talking about gated globalization. So where is globalization now headed? There have been sort of diagnoses. There have been sort of debates now that are we going back to the self-reliance sort of world? Are we going to see now more and more, more and more, and in fact, closing of the gates of globalization? So I think that is one axis of debates. The second, obviously, is about domestic politics. So what are we going to see now? Is it going to be in terms of the security aspects? Is it going to be focused more on the human security factor or on the health security factor, or are we seeing a debate? So what has happened to the hard power then? So is now would states now make decisions on their security aspects, keeping the human security more in mind, or keeping the traditional national security issues in mind? I think that is one important fault line which has emerged. The third, obviously, is about the development goals. So sustainable development goals. So what is happening now? I think they are back on the agenda in a big way. Obviously, the focus also is on climate change, and we did see that one of the first acts of the new Biden administration was really joining the Paris Agreement. So the climate change now at some level seems to be back on the international agenda. Another very important point of fault line or axis of debate which is emerging is about technological dilemmas. So what role would artificial intelligence be playing? It was an emerging field, but now it suddenly has assumed importance, obviously because of the pandemic, and about the role, about the nature of jobs. So it is now work at home. So are we seeing, so what sort of impact would it have on the economy, on jobs market, is very important. Again, fueled by the technological transformation, technological changes which have been induced by the COVID disruption. The last important, I think, debate, and in fact, which is the most crucial debate, is about the global leadership. And I think at some level it is up for grabs now. And obviously, the main contenders are the existing preeminent power, the United States. But now I think there's a clear understanding that China has really emerged now as the rival, as the peer competitor of sorts to the US. We might argue, we might debate: is that challenge, is the Chinese challenge very real, or is it only confined to some specific sectors, either in terms of technology or in terms of economy? What about ideas? What about the global influence? I think that debate is obviously an ongoing debate and cannot be settled very soon. Only time will tell us. The other point was also about the Quad. And again, when you talk about the global leadership, that, for example, on March 12th, we're going to have the Quad summit. The Quad virtual summit at the highest level for the first time. So is the new informal alliance system going to be in place now? So these are largely the broader questions which we need to keep in mind on the COVID impact on diplomacy, the bigger picture which I was talking about. What happened, taking this forward, what happened in the early days of COVID, that diplomacy specifically had three principal tasks. And the first amongst them was obviously offering of the consular assistance to citizens stranded abroad. If you would recall, because of the sudden eruption of COVID, and either with the law, then resulting in states deciding to either going for lockdowns or going or completely stopping or banning international travel. I think that really generated a completely new set of issues, because many citizens who were traveling and just didn't know that the lockdowns or the travel bans were coming, was stranded, and that really created huge problems for the citizenry in general. Secondly, and again very important at that point of time, in the early days of COVID, I'm talking about the acquiring of the much needed equipment from other nations, very important ventilating machines and protective gear for doctors. I think was a principal target, was the principal objective of diplomacy. Third, and very important, which seems to be even happening at this point of time, continues till date, was about fostering international collaborations through which scientists can jointly search for a vaccine to the coronavirus. In fact, we seem to be moving ahead on that front very rapidly. What happened, and what you can what I can see from I mean, looking back now, that there were two principal challenges to the world of diplomacy. Number one was the speedy adaptation to this digital environment, which was forced by the COVID, obviously, with social distancing, with lockdowns, with international travel completely banned. But also, let me remind you that this move towards maybe what is popularly called digital diplomacy was there prior to COVID also. But what COVID did was, and earlier it was really very slow process, a slow adaptation. But it seems that the COVID has now quickened the pace, and the focus is now a dramatic, speedy adaptation, moving to digital platforms. So I think that is a fundamental challenge which is there for states and diplomats. Number two, many surveys have really come out which really point out that in terms of responding to security challenges, that I think still remains a principal challenge for diplomacy, that how do states, either at the bilateral level or at the multilateral level, respond to emerging security challenges? Obviously, with COVID still hanging above us. And here, I think, let me break it down to five distinctive parts of the debate to see how COVID really transformed diplomacy of powers, including India. And here, the first point I'm making is that diplomacy obviously moved immediately, or rather gradually, but later speedily, from the real to the virtual world, and at some level is now knocking back to real in that sense. So what we essentially saw when COVID struck us all was that, as I was pointing out earlier, that it really meant the end of diplomacy, the death of diplomacy, demise of diplomacy. Obviously, with international travel closed, lockdowns, social distancing, health measures. So, how will diplomacy survive if leaders and diplomats don't meet, if they don't exchange notes privately, or in informal conversations, or even formal meetings? So there was a sense of gloom, there was a sense of despair, there was a sense of helplessness, and all diplomatic activities seem to have come to a grinding halt when COVID. This was obviously March, April last year, 2020. I'm talking about. But what happened was, obviously, states and diplomats immediately really rose up to the occasion, really geared themselves up, and completely moved to an online mode. So we saw a shift from the traditional mode of diplomacy to virtual diplomacy. So you have all the bilateral meetings happening in an online mode, multilateral meetings also, moving towards a virtual room. So Zoom and Google Meets became a constant feature of international interactions. So you have the UN General Assembly meetings, you have the UN Security Council meetings, NAM summits, G20 summits, Quad. Obviously, you can see the Quad summit happening virtually, Munich Security Conference. So the world of diplomacy moved towards virtual diplomacy. But again, very important caveat which I would like to add is that it is in some ways a return to the old diplomacy, the old school of diplomacy, the old ways of diplomacy, because earlier it wasn't that states didn't resolve issues, but what happened was there were limited meets, there were limited summits earlier. So it's not that we are what we are witnessing today is something very novel, which is something very new, and we haven't witnessed it earlier. So in fact, if you look at the history of diplomacy, in fact, one-to-one or face-to-face interactions were seen as, in fact, a problem, because that would have led to maybe violence, maybe more argumentation. So, in fact, the limited sort of nature of diplomacy was seen as very positive in earlier times. But also look at what is happening now. Because of the COVID restrictions, I think it has really transformed diplomacy, because you have now more flexibility. Because earlier it was impossible, or it really took lots of time and energy to really travel abroad, to juggle dates, to juggle different political assignments, diplomatic assignments, and getting the principals to agree on a select date. So I think that flexibility has now come in because of virtual diplomacy, in terms of the times, and again, time also obviously is saved for travel, for really even for accommodation, all sorts of issues. Cost, I think cost is a major factor. I think the Ministry of Finance in all countries would really be happy with this cutting down of cost for conducting diplomacy. That's a very important factor. But again, this shift to virtual diplomacy has also induced different challenges. So you have now issues of different time zones, technical internet glitches, simultaneous interpretation also seems to be a problem, inclusion, consultation of technical experts, Also, because of the compressed nature of dialogue, the compressed nature of negotiations, you have to immediately respond. So I think that is also becoming a problem. Specifically, it has this shift to virtual diplomacy has created problems for the developing world because of the limited uneven access to technology, and even the less number of personnel which they have, I think, is a major problem. Again, very important digital skills, I think, have emerged as a very important aspect of for now. It's now a prerequisite for diplomats, virtual skills, that how are you really managing your online meetings? Are you clear enough? Are you visible enough? What is your background? So I mean, these sorts of issues are now equally important in virtual diplomacy. The second important point, which in terms of the impact of diplomacy, obviously, that we now are witnessing the rise of health diplomacy, science diplomacy, and obviously it is manifested in now vaccine diplomacy. That suddenly you see the world is now much more conscious about global public health, and that is now affecting the international agenda. So you now, in fact, one of the major talking points, even for Quad Summit, is really about how does one deal with the COVID-19 challenges, and how what sort of implications it is going to have for health. The next point, the next implication, the next challenge is obviously what we are now witnessing is also, especially during COVID times, was the state branding. In fact, that emerged as one of the public diplomacy's new agenda, where you really saw states talking about different values, which explain the failures or successes in managing COVID. So also people are comparing their own nation's responses with other states all the time, either in terms of numbers, in terms of what sort of quarantine effectiveness, and also lockdowns. So, for example, here you see a shift. Here you see, for example, China. That China initially began being challenged or being accused of spreading the virus and keeping even the WHO or even the international public at large, international governments, the other governments, in dark about COVID. And in fact, that if China would have informed much earlier, it would have not spread that far. So China started with that, but gradually it moved to really changing that narrative, to really managing COVID successfully, to in fact getting its economy back on track, and now even providing vaccines to different parts of the world. Now, obviously, Taiwan and South Korea again projecting their success stories internationally. So I think that state branding really affected for India. That India, for example, was now seen as a global health security provider. We all are now seeing the so-called vaccine Maitri being talked about, and the idea of Vasudeva Kutumbakam, that the world is one family. So each state was now using this opportunity to brand itself in a very important, successful way, so that you reap the benefits of that branding. The next point, obviously, I would like to focus is about this shift and an aggressive shift to digital diplomacy, which was really citizen-centric, and which really involved, in fact, embassies were now converted into virtual embassies, and the consular services were completely digital, were completely online. In fact, if you look at, through March, April till almost October, the social media was filled with cries of help and distress and emergencies. So I think what immediately embassies and consulates then did was to really move to the digital channels to offer advice on return flights, on repatriation procedures. But they significantly also showed solidarity with the local population affected by the pandemic, and were at the forefront in many ways to explore conditions with the host authorities for joint responses to the crises. I think that's a very important aspect. Also, in fact, when the pandemic looked very scary in the initial weeks and months last year, the foreign affairs ministries and the embassies, they were also under increasing pressure to provide accurate and timely information about the nature of the threat and the responses that authorities had taken to protect and assist the public. Chatbots, I think, so the chat functions, I think, became very important, and they really helped with for most of the diplomatic institutions, embassies, and they seem to because of the lack of human resources, because of the magnitude of the task, suddenly you see a spike in the number of responses being sought from the embassies. So I think chatbots, in fact, really helped the embassies in many ways. Very important also, conspiracy theories and a disinformation campaign, either about different states. Those even also had to be handled during these times. The other and the last point, I think, very important, which was also the principal argument I made, was that ultimately it was the power politics which seemed to drive diplomacy, and which seem to be shaping international relations even today. So though COVID-19, in fact, disrupted diplomacy, disrupted international relations, but the common power politics strain which runs through centuries of interactions at the different societal level, at the international level, I think that really continued in many ways. Obviously, so you experience that with the US-China, how they were really now upping the game on the rivalry. We also witnessed at Galwan that despite COVID, that ultimately power politics, the Chinese desire to have a hegemonic position in Asia was equally at play even during COVID. And now you see India-US bonhomie obviously reflected very importantly in the Quad and the Quad Plus interactions. So that is all about the larger big picture about how COVID seemed to have transformed diplomacy in 5 ways, as I pointed out. Quickly moving to India. As I pointed out, India obviously began 2020 on a high note with President Trump and India. And then you suddenly see all travel completely stopped, and that seemed to be a principal challenge for India. That how does really India go about its achieving its national foreign policy objectives? But in fact, India's story seems to be a success story in many ways. India, in fact, was one of the early movers to go virtual. So you immediately have the SAARC summit, the G20 summit, the NAM summit. So in the early weeks of COVID, in fact, you have the India went ahead and had, in fact, the first virtual summit with Australia. Obviously, the Quad meeting on March 12, very important sign of success. Very important, I think, in the early days, India, because of the nature of the problem, then India started the Vande Bharat mission, where India was really getting its own citizens stranded in different parts of the world. That was a big logistical nightmare, that you were really picking up different citizens really from far distant corners of the world and getting back not to Delhi, but the flights were going to Kolkata, the flights were going to Mumbai, the flights were going to Pune, the flights were going to Kerala. So, I mean, that was really a big logistical challenge, which India really did achieve. That was, in fact, was appreciated internationally. India also took the lead in really sending foreigners who were on the Indian soil to their respective countries actively. So I think that was appreciated by many countries abroad. India also, in the initial months, moved to supplying the PPE kit, the HCQL tab. Proactively to Maldives, to Kuwait. India also moved rapidly because of this question of supply chains. The whole concept of Atmanirbhar Bharat announced by Prime Minister Modi in May, I think that really showed that India was really not only responding through different, but even in ideational terms, India was thinking that how so that in the larger frame of time, how could India really succeed and overpower COVID, and what challenges and experience it saw during COVID. That the supply chains have to be secure, they have to be resilient. I think that was a very important point which Prime Minister Modi made. Again, one important phase which we are now seeing, obviously because of the success of producing vaccines. In fact, MEA has just come out with its statistics that in terms of vaccine maitri, that so far 68 countries have received COVID-19 vaccines manufactured in India, and the data clearly says that 35 have been given as grants in aid. So this is 8 million doses. That's huge. You have the 15 states being given COVID vaccines on a purely commercial basis. So that's 34 million sold doses. And then you have 18 states who have been given through COVAX. So 16 million have been provided. So what essentially you are seeing uh, that India has successfully moved either in terms of providing the initial, that India really very successfully got a grip, got a handle on COVID and the challenges it posed for conducting diplomacy. So it moved rapidly towards an online mode. It really moved to understanding that the world needed India's base of manufacturing for PPE equipment for, as I said, HCQ tablets, and now vaccines. So India successfully, in that sense, became a global health security provider. And the idea, and in fact, if you look at Prime Minister Modi's speeches during this last, almost 8, 9, 10 months, or even the Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar talking about the world is one family, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Very importantly, that the values which India has. And again, that seems to have clicked, and that seems to be appreciated. But again, we were also, as I said, that hardcore security challenges still remain. So obviously, you see what happened in Ladakh. Also on the ceasefire, on the India-Pakistan front, the line of control, we also saw that there was a announcement of ceasefire. Despite COVID highlighting, and that lesson applies not only for India, that COVID-19 really threw up multiple challenges in terms of personnel, in terms of technology, in terms of politics, in terms of how at the basic level states conducted relations with each other, either bilaterally or multilaterally. And again, the focus on the human security. Despite that, you see, gradually now we are now even as we even frontally address the questions of health security, human security, through vaccines, through a much better public health system, and really sharing those lessons internationally. The regular feature of international politics, the power politics, hasn't gone away. Maybe at some early days of the COVID, we thought that was vanishing, but that has now come back in a big way. As always, as expected, and that is a common feature of international politics. So I think I will stop here, and as I said, the larger picture, that COVID, in fact, did disrupt international relations, did disrupt the way in which states conducted diplomacy, but at some level it also led to transformation. It led to innovation, which I think bodes well for the world, but also bodes well for India, because India also saw this crisis as an opportunity to really also play a leadership role at some level, at the global level. So thank you very much, and I again thank you for the opportunity, and really want to compliment the organizers for organizing this truly mammoth international webinar. And I think I mean, this is a fantastic initiative, so thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your talk on the COVID effect. Now, Dr. Jagmeet Bawa will deliver his speech on Post-COVID World, a roadmap for foreign policy. Please let me introduce Dr. Bawa. He is Assistant Professor, International Resource Center, Universal Human Values in Education, Punjab Technical University. He holds a PhD in Indian political system. Having a total teaching experience of 11 years, he has also taught a new subject called Human Values and Professional Ethics. He is a PhD and MPhil guide and has published numerous papers and articles which include analysis of Gandhian philosophy of conflict resolution and impact of advertising on children. Dr. Bawa has published 3 books which include Terrorism and Indian Ordeal and Women in Contemporary India. This is Dr. Jagmeet Bawa, who will now deliver his speech.
The management of the Tuljaram Chaturchand College, Baramati, the principal Dr. Chandrasekhar Murumkar, Vice Principal Dr. Ajit Telve, Head Department of Political Science Mr. Hanumant Pathak ji, and Dr. Kailash Mante ji, which is the coordinator for this wonderful international conference. And I'm thankful to all of you to introducing me to for giving me a chance to appear in this international conference which you are organizing on the related to the pandemic which we are facing for the last 1 year, probably more than 1 year now, and the pandemic which has changed the global scenario to a great extent and affected the life of each and every person around the globe. So really, once again, I'm thankful for this opportunity, and I congratulate all of you for organizing this conference, which is really relevant. The topic is very relevant, and it is the need of the hour. Being a student of the political science, it's a matter of concern for all of us that how, because usually we used to say that every incident in the society used to affect the program, policies of the government and the working of the political system. And now when we have such a big event which is affecting the entire globe, entire the globe, affecting the each and every nation. So this pandemic is going to affect the policies of the governments, nations, and all the international actors are being affected by this Chinese virus, which I would like to say. And so in this lecture, I have 3 things to touch in my lecture. The first one is about the pandemic's impact on the common man's life, how it has impacted the life of a common man. Because before going to the nation state concept, or before going to the foreign policies of the different nations or of India, I would like to discuss for a while with you that how the life of a common man has been affected, and how those when the life of a common man is affected, definitely it is going to affect the working of a political system also. In the second segment, I will like to discuss with all of you about the new world order, which we are hopeful to see immediately after the end of this pandemic. As we all know, the pandemic is not over yet, especially the organizing state of this international webinar, where we are witnessing the second wave, very strong second wave in Maharashtra. each and every day we are coming news we are coming through from the Maharashtra, especially, even some other states also. And as per the reports of the newspapers and the television, I have come to know that in many of the cities, especially Nagpur and other cities, the lockdown has been once again started in Maharashtra. So pandemic is not over yet, not only in India, it is still prevalent in the other parts of the world. England, we have seen the second wave, and last week only we have come to know that the second wave is far strong, 4 times or 5 times more strong than the first wave. It is more deadly, and it is going to infect more people in case we are not going to control it in the earliest possible. So, in the second segment, I will try to explain that what will be the new world order, because all of us we were expecting that the new world order will start with in the March or April, because medicine is out there, but still pandemic is not over, and we are expecting the new world order that will appear in the next 1 or 2 months. We will try to discuss those things. And in the last segment, towards the end of my lecture, I will focus on India particularly, that how this pandemic has affected the national or foreign policy of India, and what are the measures which we are supposed to take regarding this pandemic. So these are the 3 main things which I am going to cover in my lecture. So, as I have already pointed out earlier, that mankind is going through an ordeal. It's a time of turmoils, and really we all need to sit back, and we need to think, we need to decide it once again, that what are the priorities which we need to fix as a member of a society and as a member of the particular community or the nation or the state also. So in the last 1 year, we had a very tough time, and during that last 1 year, we had so many things which we have to take decisions in the emergency conditions. And no doubt, we have taken so many decisions in the emergency situation, and I hope all of you are going to be agree with me that those decisions which we have taken in the emergency time, they are going to affect the whole world for the years to come, because those policies were not exactly for the long time, but the policies, the programs which we have chalked out for the pandemic time only, they are going to continue for the next few years. That's what I'm hoping for. So these policies, they have affected every aspect of our life, and I'm a bit positive and I'm affirmative also that this turmoil time is going to be over very soon, especially in India, where we have discovered, where we have invented a vaccine also. We have started the vaccine. I think it's almost more than 1 month when we have started the vaccine giving to the people. Now 3rd phase is about to start about the vaccination, and this storm is going to be over very soon, and most of us are going to see the new world. We need not to worry, as we are scared last year in the March 2020. In the last 1 year, what we have discovered and what we have come to know, that now the things are really not that worrisome. We have many solutions to it, and the recovery rate, especially in India, is really higher than really very high, and it is higher than the other world, especially the developed world, because in the March 2020, all of us used to discuss that India, it's going to be a disastrous for India, especially for India and other developing countries, because of the reason that we don't have that much infrastructure in the field of health. We don't have good hospitals. We don't have so many doctors. And as you all of know, at the time of the pandemic, in most of the states in India, we were not even having the adequate number of the ventilators. We used to have the hospitals without the ventilators, hospitals without the doctors. And there are even the cases where we used to have the hospitals, but without even the beds also. So in such a situation, it was expected that it is going to be a disastrous for India. But luckily, fortunately, we have worked out in a very good manner. Most of the state governments and the central government, they have done well. And to a great extent, we have controlled the damage. But as I have already said that most of us are going to see the new world, we are going to be the inhabitants of the new world immediately after the pandemic. But the new world which we are expecting is going to be a totally a new world. It will not be the same which we have witnessed for the last decades, last few decades or last few years. It will be a different world. It will be a new world. It will be a world with new rules, new regulations. That in this emergency times, we will go for the immature techniques without any adequate testing. And it happened also that in the last 1 year, so many decisions which were taken, they were taken in the discussion of few hours only. And earlier, we used to take these decisions after the deliberations of the years. And I have so many examples with me. The biggest example of those things is the AstraZeneca medicine, which has been invented by the Oxford University. As you all know that most of the people, they were expecting it to be the best medicine. And there were so many hopes for this medicine, but now in the last 4 or 5 days, this medicine has been banned in the more than 10 important countries of the world. People are rejecting it. People are not, even the governments have announced not to implement, not to use this medicine. Reason why, there are so many complications. People who have taken this medicine, they are facing so many problems, especially related to the blood clots. And unfortunately, we have lost so many important lives after having this medicine, or let me say, just because of this medicine, those who have taken this medicine, we have lost many people. Why it happened so? Because we have taken it in haste. We were not having time for the proper testing of the medicine. Generally, a medicine takes almost more than 10 to 15 years to reach the market. But in the case of these medicines, especially AstraZeneca, it is with the user within the 7 to 8 months or 9 months. Indian medicine, which we have, COVID Shield and the other one, they are quite successful, and we don't have registered even a single problem related to those medicines. But I will say, even those medicines, we don't have gone for the complete testing of those medicines. So what I mean to say that we are taking decision in the haste. We are not taking the proper time, and reason because for that is we are really not having the time for that also. So these are the measures which we have adopted for pandemic. Now the question is whether we are going to adopt it for the rest of the time, or they are going to be over. Now, for the citizens of this world, I'm coming to the main point. I'm coming to the main gist of my lecture. So people have few choices to make now. During the pandemic and after the pandemic, there are many things which we have to decide now. And the first among them, and the foremost among them, is to take a decision, to take a call between the totalitarian surveillance or the citizen empowerment. The first thing which we come to know about the pandemic is about the totalitarian surveillance. I am still remembering the day during the pandemic last year. I hope it was in the last week of the March. Harari, Yuval Noah Harari wrote a very good article for some foreign paper, and he predicted about this surveillance. He has called for this surveillance, and according to him, those countries are going to survive only which have the proper surveillance system, not only during this pandemic, but the coming, because he has predicted that these pandemics will be very often now, because most of the people are doubtful that this virus has been generated in the laboratory only, and if it has been generated in the laboratory, that in that case we can expect that there may so many viruses or so many pandemics are there in the pipeline which can hit the world, hit the economy of the world, or whatever it is. We are supposed to be ready for those. Then if it is a surveillance, what type of surveillance it is? Because it is not a surveillance only. I have named here totalitarian surveillance. What is totalitarian surveillance? States, they are supposed to have their citizens on the surveillance, especially those people who are having some doubtful nature, who can create problem for the state. And we have example of many states which have put their citizens on the surveillance, especially in the China, in the Uyghur province. They have put most of their citizens on the surveillance. That is electronic surveillance. They have installed the special camera, sensor-enabled camera, which can identify the people, and they can immediately identify that which person is where and what is he doing, to whom he is meeting. There are so many things. Recently, we had a report from the UNESCO also about that. Even not only the surveillance, but the concentration type centers they have developed there in the state. So, is it the same type of surveillance? Exactly not. But what type of surveillance it is then? The surveillance is, when we are talking of a pandemic, when we are discussing in the context of a pandemic, we need to identify the activities of the people who are not well. Suppose there are few people who are prone to the any illness, then we need to check out their activities. Suppose we have sent them to some quarantine. So whether they are in the quarantine, if they are in the quarantine, how they are behaving, what is the reaction of their body, how their body is reacting to certain medicine or to quarantine, or otherwise also whether they are going out of the quarantine. In case they are going out of the quarantine, whom they are meeting, whom they are infecting. All this is important from the pandemic's point of view, as when we are discussing the surveillance. So surveillance initially is meant for this only. Then what type of surveillance it will be? Earlier we used to have over the skin surveillance. Now when we are talking in the context of a pandemic, it is going to be a under the skin surveillance. What is under the skin surveillance? When we are talking of under the skin surveillance, it is going to be a special biometric bracelet which will be given to you by the state, and this biometric bracelet will note down the readings of your body, all the important readings related to your body, and then it used to pass on the information to the authorities. Now, what sort of things it used to pass on? For example, how much body temperature you have, how much blood pressure you have, and it will pass on the things to the government, so that the government, or it may be any authority, they will come to know that whether you are prone to any disease or you are infected by any disease. So now please, for a while, imagine a world which is full of such bracelets, which is full of such surveillance, high-tech surveillance, I will call it. When the people, they are wearing biometric bracelets, what will happen? They will pass on the information to a certain system where it is stored, and there very high-tech algorithms used to play this information, and will, with the help of those algorithms, government used to identify the people which are at risk, who are the people whom to treat, and who are the people whom to contact or whom to send to the quarantine or to whatever it is. They will it will be helpful for the government to make a policy and to identify the people. What will happen when we use such bracelets, biometric type of bracelets? It will shorten the length of the pandemic, because now in a country like India, we have a second highest population of the world in our country, and we are really not able in this position that who is infected and who's not infected. Because in a country like India, where we have around 140 crore people, we cannot go for intensive testing. We cannot provide testing to every person that you are infected or not. As in the case of some very small countries, they are very successful as far as this pandemic is concerned, because they have gone for the intensive testing. But in India, you cannot go for a testing. In case you are supposed to test 140 crore people, it will take more than 10 years to test each and every one. Not 10 years, you are going very fast, 3 to 4 years at least required, which is really not possible. That's a big span of time. In such a condition, these bracelets, these surveillance system are very useful. And now, if we are giving that much of freedom to the government that they can monitor each and everything of ours, is it useful, or it has some drawbacks also? If talking about the usefulness only, I have already discussed that we can shorten the length of the pandemic with the help of such things. But when we are going to the other side, there are so many problems. The big corporations or the government, they can play with you. They can, using your information related to your body, they can sell it to the market where it may be used positively or negatively. There are going to be so many effects on our personal life, especially the personal freedom, privacy of the life. Let me tell you one thing. We have some biological phenomena. What are those biological phenomena? These are fever and cough. Just like these two biological phenomena, even anger, joy, boredom, happiness, sorrow, love, whatever it is, they all are also the biological phenomena. If any surveillance system can find out the fever, it can find out the cough, in a same manner, it can find out the element of love, element of anger, or anything else in you. So now suppose there, take an example of a authoritarian country like China or the North Korea, where they have the totalitarian leaders. Suppose they have given the bracelet to everyone. I'm talking about I'm talking about a bracelet. It may be bracelet or it may be something else. Even not only the bracelet, it may be even the mobile phone also, which can work as a surveillance mechanism for the government or for the authorities. Suppose you have any such mechanism which is part of the surveillance system with your body, then what will happen? Suppose in North Korea, the leader of the North Korea is going to deliver a lecture, and he has told each and everyone to listen to that lecture. And while listening to the lecture, and you have a feeling of anger, then immediately your that feeling will be transferred to the authorities that such and such person, there were 10,000 people who were listening to your lecture, and out of those 10,000 people, these are the 100 people who were angry, who are having the feeling of anger. This is the number of the people who are having happy, they are joyful, they are like this and that. So what will be the plight of those people who are angry while listening to the lecture of that totalitarian leader? We can easily expect that we cannot give that much of freedom to our authorities to know about our personal feelings. Let me tell you one thing very clearly. I have said it bracelet, it may be bracelet or it may be something else. For example, you are having a smartphone or iPhone, whatever you can say. So when you will touch the screen of your telephone, your finger touches any link over the telephone, you know what will happen? That if it is enabled with a surveillance system, it will pass on the temperature of your finger to the authorities. Not only the temperature of your finger, that will be the, when I'm saying temperature of your body, it is about the outer skin. And not only the outer skin, below the skin also, it will pass on the blood pressure of your body to the authorities. This is going to be very dangerous phenomena, and authorities during the pandemic it can be allowed, but after the pandemic such things are going to be very dangerous. And let me tell you one thing more. There are such things which are started by the government during some emergency situations, and even after the emergency has been passed on, they used to continue all those things. Take the example of the Israel in 1949. On the name of the security of the nation, they have put so many restrictions on the privacy of the life. Until date, they are existing. In the last 7 to 8 years, most of them were abolished, but still, some of them are still existing, and they are dangerous. They are really dangerous. So, if surveillance system is really not helpful, then what we are supposed to do? Is there any substitute to the surveillance system? See, surveillance system can be allowed to some extent, but not to a greater extent, and that too for a limited period during the emergency only. But there is a substitute to the surveillance system, that is the empowering the citizens. If you are having a small state, you are having not a very big number of population. In that case, by empowering the state, your citizens, you can handle the situation without the help of the surveillance also. It happened in Singapore, it happened in Taiwan, it happened in South Korea, where the government has controlled the pandemic in a very short span of time, just because of the cooperation of the citizens, just because the citizens of that country were really empowered. What they have done the extensive testing, they have the system of honestly reporting, and in that country people and government are really cooperative to each other. So by doing these three things, we can surpass the system of the totalitarian surveillance. But a country like India, where we have a big population, we need to go for a surveillance also. But that surveillance should not be, it shouldn't be totalitarian. It should be for the emergency time only, and immediately after the emergency, it should be removed. This was the one aspect which I'm talking of, and about which we need to aware the people about and also the system, the governments also, because nowadays, on the name of the pandemic, governments are really taking such measures which are dangerous for the privacy of the life. Now I'm coming to the second, as I have already said in the beginning, that for the citizens there are many choices which we are need to make. The first one which I have already discussed about the totalitarian surveillance or the empowering the citizens. Now the second one is, it is all about the nationalist isolation or the global solidarity. Now we have two options. One is the global solidarity. Either we can go for the global solidarity, or otherwise we can go for the nationalist isolation. What happened recently in the last 1 year? Immediately the pandemic started, what we have done, what the nations have done, the first thing which they have done is have closed all the airports. In India, because it is in the context of India only, this webinar, we have seen 100 years back when we had the last epidemic here, or the pandemic here in India, it was plague. And immediately after the First World War, we had a plague here in India. And people used to say that the plague has been sent to every corner of India through the railway. I hope you have heard about it, because the people who were coming back from the First World War after fighting the First World War, they were coming to India because the number of such soldiers were in lakhs, and they were from each and every corner of the country. So they were going back to their villages, their towns through railway, and that's why it has been said that the plague has been scattered throughout the India through railway. This time, people used to claim that same has been done through the airways, through the aeroplanes. So a Chinese virus which has been originated in China has gone to the different parts of the world. It's true, that is through the airways only. All the airports were closed. Not only the airports, when coming to the Indian context, you will know that even the states were closed. All of you are sitting in Maharashtra. People were so scared of the people of Maharashtra in the rest of the India. If anyone is coming from Maharashtra, they were so scared that the people they are coming from Maharashtra, because the situation was very great there in the Maharashtra, and it was problem is the worst hit area in India was the Maharashtra. Till date, Maharashtra is more sensitive towards this pandemic. So even we have check post at the district level also. If you are going from one district to another district, there used to be a blockade. There used to be some check post, police or someone else is going to check you out. So is it that we are talking of this isolation, will it work? Do we able to handle the pandemic with the isolation only? Then I will say no. We won't be able to check the pandemic through the isolation only. This is a global pandemic. The entire world is under the influence of this pandemic. It's a global pandemic. So in order to check it, we need to have the global solidarity. We need to help each other. We need to share the information about the pandemic with each other. We need to share the instruments, medicines with each other. Only then we will be able to control the pandemic. So the best solution for this, when we are talking of this choice, I will go for the global solidarity. But unfortunately, it has not happened in most of the parts of the world till now. Why? It has been started in China, and for the initial 3 to 4 months, at least for 3 months, China really has not shared any of the information with anybody outside the China about this pandemic, and it has come to the surface only when it has been all over the world. So that was the initially mistake which has been done by the China. Now we need to come forward, all the nations, all the international organizations, to handle this pandemic, and we need to go for the global solidarity. So now it was the base for which it is a platform of my presentation which I have discussed with you. Now I'm coming to the main point. As I have already discussed in the beginning, that there will be 3 parts. The second part is going to be the post-COVID world order. What will be the world order immediately after the this COVID-19? There are 3 questions which we have to answer. The first one is who will be the world leader in the next few months? Before the COVID-19, the unanimous world leader, no doubt, the world is not unipolar now. as we used to say for the last 20 or 30 years, that world is unipolar. But in the last years, we used to say that the world is multipolar now. But even in the multipolar world, it, America was the world leader. So before the pandemic, the world leader was the America. And now, who will be the world leader after the pandemic? This is the first question which we need to address, that whether America is going to retain the position or it will be replaced by someone else, especially as in talking in terms of the economy. American economy has been deteriorated very badly, as we all know very well that America has been hit very badly by the pandemic. And this country has the maximum number of the deaths due to the pandemic. The economy of the America has been badly kicked away by the pandemic. So we have so many problems in America due to the pandemic. But in the last year, in the last 3 months of last year, what we have seen that economically China has surpassed America very easily. As far as the European Union's trade was concerned, earlier it was the lion's share was with the America only, but after during the pandemic and nowadays, the European Union has the maximum trade with the China. So China has overtaken the America in terms of the trade with the European Union, which is going to be the big push for the Chinese economy. So this is the one aspect. Second aspect is what will be the determinants of the national power. How we are going to measure the power of any nation. Generally, what we used to say before the pandemic, just to measure the national power of any country or any nation, we have so many elements or determinants. What are those determinants? Army, weapons of mass destruction, how many missiles you have, how many nuclear weapons you have, so many things. So, but are they going to, all those things going to work even after the pandemic? For me, a big no. I'm really not sure that all those things are going to work even in the post-COVID world order. Now the determinants of the national power are going to be different. The determinants of the new world order are going to be different. What are those determinants then, which are going to decide about the economic power or the national power of any country? For me, number one is the surveillance, which I have already discussed to a great extent, but not the totalitarian surveillance. The country which used to have a very good surveillance mechanism for their citizens, the countries which have a proper mechanism to identify the people with the higher risk with any pandemic will be more powerful in the days to come. Now, many of us will say that India has nothing like that. But I'm sorry, even India has taken some steps for that. For example, during the pandemic, even our government has started that sort of surveillance. It is in an initial stage. We hope that more developments will take place in this regard in the days to come, especially immediately after the pandemic. All of us used to have a Arogya Setu. I think most of the people, they used to have a app Arogya Setu, which is a means of surveillance by the government of India only. And not only the central government, most of the state governments, they have also introduced their own surveillance apps. I'm not sure that whether there is anyone in Maharashtra, but here in North India, states have their own apps to control the people, to know, to surveillance the people of their own state. Even in the states where states have not the different system, we have at least a centralized app which is known as the Arogya Setu. And the second one is the second factor which is going to be very important for the nations is the mutual trust. Those governments and citizens, where the governments and citizens have a better mutual trust, they are going to be the more powerful in the next 5 to 10 years. Because pandemic, is all about creating or holding the nerves, where the government is in position, where the people believe their governance, that yes, their system is going to support them, their system is going to help them out during the pandemic, during such an emergency situation. In those countries, things are going to be smoother in the days to come. In those countries, the government need not to fight with the people of their own country. The government need not to fight the unrest of their own people. Because in a states where the people are with the unrest, the state is not going to be stable. For example, in India, I'm positive about it, and in the last 1 year, our government has done fairly well. People have been provided ration, rice, and all those things, food at their home. And I think in the government system, in most of the states and especially the central government, there is not any cut-off of the salary. The implies that they have been provided the full salary. And the government was helping also. If someone has been affected by the COVID or the pandemic, the treatment was free from the government in case you are going to the public hospital. So mutual trust is going to be the important thing between the citizens and the government. And the last thing which is going to be very important, it is high-tech health system. Those countries which have very high-tech health systems, they are going to be more powerful in the new world order. How? Because as I have already said, this pandemic is not the end of the game. It is not the last one. We need to prepare for such many more pandemics in the days to come. So how high-tech health system? We need to provide good health and good hospitals to the people. We need to provide good doctors to the people, not only good doctors, but a higher number of doctor per person doctor. I think still we are not having that good number of doctors for people in India, but we need to cover it up in case we want to appear as a stronger nation in the days to come. We need to have RD in the field of medicines. Really, the India which was on the back seat just before the pandemic is now on the front seat just because of one development, and that is the invention of the medicine, which we have COVID Shield and some other medicines which are developed by the Bharat Pharma. So it has given us a driver's seat, not only in our own country, but in the rest of the world also. So that's why, that is why high-tech health system is really required to be a powerful nation. And the last thing, you should have a global acceptability. And how we will have a global acceptability? With a global reputation. Those countries who have global reputation, globally good reputation, they are going to be more powerful. Take an example of the China. As I have already said, they are doing very well in the economy. During the pandemic, Chinese economy has done well. But even then, no one is ready to trust the Chinese medicine or Chinese anything. I would really love to share one or two things with the listeners, that Bangladesh is very close to this China. And there are some other countries which are very close to China. And during the pandemic, there is only one country which has believed China during the pandemic, and that is Pakistan only, because they don't have any other way out. Even a country like Nepal, they refuse to take the medicines from the China. What UAE has done, UAE has brought a good amount of medicine from China, and they wanted to distribute it to the other nations. There were so many nations which have refused to take the Chinese medicine. First among them was the Malaysians. They have refused to take the Chinese medicine. And even in the Egypt and some other countries, they have refused, and they said, we are not going to take the Chinese medicine. This is all about the acceptability, which I have said. This is all about the global reputation. So we need to have a good reputation, which India has earned, especially during the this pandemic, with the help of the vaccine diplomacy, or I can say health diplomacy. So this was the second aspect of my lecture. And the third one, the last one, which I'm going to approach, is whether what is going to be the situation for India, and what are the tips for India in the post-COVID situation. Rather, approaching the thing directly, is it an opportunity for India? Because most of the people used to say that our economy and our system has been spoiled by the pandemic in India. But I am taking it as an advantage. I am taking it as an opportunity. And now it is up to ourselves that how we are going to take this opportunity. Are we going to grab it, or are we going to miss it? How? Before the pandemic, the entire Asia has been cinified. China has, its impact almost in every country of the Asia, especially in South Asia. Every country was under the influence of China. And even the country like Nepal, which we used to consider as the, younger brother of India, they were under the clutches of the Chinese. And we had witnessed very bad relations with not only China, with some other countries, just because of the China only. So even in the backyard of India, China was playing very well. You can take the example of Sri Lanka, you can take the example of Myanmar, Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan, even Afghanistan, Myanmar. Every country which is around India, that was under the clutches of the China. But except only one country, Bhutan, I will say. The Chinese policy, which we used to know as the string of pearls, which they have created to tackle India, it was very successful. And some of the scholars used to say that the Indian neighborhood has become more crowded and more competitive just because of the Chinese aggressive policies especially against India. So before the pandemic, China was really powerful around India, especially in South Asia. But this COVID vaccine, which has been proved currency for the international diplomacy in the last few days, last few weeks, India has regained, or I think it is even regained, word is really not proper, because we were never in that position. We have achieved a new position in the world, in the entire globe, with the help of our vaccine. We are providing in the last 1 or 2 months, we have provided vaccine to more than 40, I think it's 48 or 50 countries. 2 or 3 days back, the number of countries to whom we have provided the vaccine was 48. And these 48, it includes big countries, developed countries. I still remember that last time when we had a pandemic in 50s here in India, our health minister, a lady from Punjab, which she was a health minister of India, She herself went to Canada to receive the medicine. And the same Canada is now receiving the medicine, is now asking the India for the medicine for this pandemic. And let me tell you one thing very frankly. Last few months were really, very disturbing for India from the Canadian point of view, because Sikh extremists who are in big number in Canada, they are operating from the Canada, Khalistani elements. Canada was supporting them openly. Canadian government, especially the Trudeau government, they are in favor of this. They are even the staunch supporters of the Khalistan. They were made ministers in the Trudeau government. Not only they were given the portfolios, rather they were given the most important portfolios in the government of Trudeau. And even in the Kisan agitation which is going on in the outskirts of Delhi, the most of the help which is coming for that protest is coming from the Canada in terms of money and in terms of things. Even the people from Canada, they are traveling to India to support that. Every day, every weekend, we used to see the news about the protests against India on the basis of this Farm Acts which we have, which Indian government has brought last year. So, but due to this vaccine, Canada is on the back foot. And last week only, they have it is for the first time when the Canadian government has registered the FIRs against those who are insulting the Indian flag, who were insulting the Indian sentiments. And the one of the opposition leaders' brother and brother-in-law are among those who their name appeared in the FIR. So it is just because of the India's growing power due to the vaccine diplomacy that a country like Canada, which was supporting the Khalistanis since the beginning, they are now on the side of the India for the last few weeks, and that is the only because of the one reason, and that was the vaccine diplomacy. And I hope you have seen the placards which were put by the Canadian government on the roads of the Canada, the same roads where Khalistani postal boys used to appear with the big cutouts. They have put the posters in thanking India and its prime minister in the last few days. Same has happened in the England also. It is for the first time when we are earning that sort of a reputation in Canada or in England, and that is just because of the vaccine diplomacy, which we are vaccine Maitri, which in the government of India has named that medicine. Now, coming especially to this India and its neighbors, India during this pandemic, India has adopted the policy which is known as the Neighborhood First policy. And under this policy, India has decided to provide the medicine to all its neighbors. And the important thing here, which is mentionable here, is that the International Health Organization has announced last month that the developing countries will not be able to receive the medicine until the end of 2023. So they need to wait for another 3 years for the medicine. But what India has done, India has not discriminated with the developed or developing countries. India has supplied the medicine, the vaccine, mostly to the developing nations. It may be Egypt, it may be all the countries in the Africa, or even in South Asia. We are supplying the vaccine to all the nations, irrespective of their economic position in the world order. So I will take country-wise. I know the time is running out, but I will take the 2 or 3 countries as the time permit. First of all, I will discuss the Nepal. Historically, Nepal is the friendly state for India, and we had very good ties with Nepal since the time immemorial. But in the last 5 or 6 years, we have very strained relations with China, and it started in 2015 when the blockade came up due to the new developments of new constitution, where one of community which belongs to India that has been discriminated, the Madeshi community. So India was not having any other alternative other than supporting the Madheshis, and just because of that incident, we had a very bad, stage of relations between India and Nepal. And in the meantime, China is playing for a long time. They are playing through the Communist Party of Nepal. They were investing heavily through the Communist Party of Nepal, and since that Oli government, which is a government of the Maoist coalition, and which were behind the curtain, it was played by the China only. That has added, fuel to the fire, and China invested very heavily into Nepal, and because of that monetary pressure, which we used to call debt diplomacy of the China, the relations between Kathmandu and Delhi, they were gone to the back seat. So, and the last and the latest incident, which is which is really unfortunate about the India-Nepalese relations, that was the Kalapani incident, which took place last year only, especially when India has opened a road towards the Chinese border, 80-kilometer road it was, and immediately China claimed that this area, especially the Kalapani area, belongs to Nepal, and the Chinese authorities within no time officially changed their map. Earlier, the Chinese map doesn't include the Kalapani area, but the new map which they have released immediately, they have changed their map. That include the Kalapani area also, and it fueled and China immediately intervened into it, and because China had its own interest, known to all of you, so the position deteriorated to more. But in such a situation, India was really on the back seat. We were really not having any say in Kathmandu, and Kathmandu was really driven by Beijing only. So immediately during this pandemic only, in December, the infighting in the Maoist coalition reached the peak, and during this, due to this infighting, the government was, Oli had to resign. But before Oli resigned, before Oli dissolved the parliament, the Chinese authorities tried their level best to save the government. They don't want to lose the government in Nepal, but all in vain. And Oli had to resign, and the resignation of the Oli is a very good. It was a very good opportunity for Delhi, and luckily, Delhi grabbed the situation, the opportunity immediately. And what happened? We have sent our invoice immediately, and immediately after our invoice, we have sent our head of the chief of the army staff to Nepal, and we have created a platform to talk for the talks. And luckily, immediately, India, within the 1 week of India's vaccination drive rolled out, we have decided to give the vaccines, 1 million doses of the vaccine to Nepal without any cost, and that too in a time when we need it for our own citizens. Indian government has decided to donate it to the Nepalese, and in the meantime, China had also promised Nepal for this medicine, but China has not supplied it to Nepal, and India has supplied it to Nepal. There was a hitch which was related to the WHO. Because of that only China was not able to provide the medicine to Nepal, and India took the opportunity, and luckily uh, uh, that worked also. And now India is in a really a different position, and we are in a platform where we can hide off the incidents of the Kalapani or of the blockade of 2015 also. And because China was investing heavily for the last 2 or 3 decades in the Nepal, India was never in a position to compete China into that investment because of the low economy of India. And the second important factor is the multi-layered bureaucracy, which which is suffering from red tapeism. We were never in a position to invest heavily in Nepal, and we have compensated that situation with the help of the vaccine. This is all about Nepal. And nowadays there are two things. Number one, Nepal has no need of Chinese vaccine because they have ordered more vaccine from India. Number one. Number two, even in case China is going to supply the vaccine to Nepal, it will not be welcomed anymore, because the need which they were earlier, that has been fulfilled by the India itself. So that was all about Nepal. The second thing is Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is a different story, entirely different from Nepal. We had good relations with Sri Lanka. Still, we are having a better relations with Sri Lanka. And but again, the problem was the same. China has invested very heavily in Sri Lanka in the last 10 years. And because of that only, Chinese authorities, they were under the impression of the, Sri Lankan authorities, they were under the impression of the Chinese. And there were many instances where Sri Lanka preferred Beijing in place of the New Delhi, especially after the coronation of this Rajpakshe in 2019. He was clearly on the side of China. Prior to his tenure, 2 years prior to his tenure, China had signed an agreement with India. And according to that agreement, India was supposed to construct a major part of a port in Colombo, but it was yet to start. When this Rajpakshe came to power in 2019, India urged him repeatedly to start that work, but in place of starting it, they have put a big no to Indian projects in Colombo, and he has given all the projects to China. It happened last year only, but immediately after this, last month only, Indian Foreign Minister R. Jaishankar, he himself went to the Sri Lanka, and there were multi-level discussions, and we hope the result of those discussions will be out very soon, because it's few days back only when he had gone to the Colombo. But immediately after his visit, India has sent a good amount of vaccine, COVID shield doses to the Sri Lanka. And the positive sign is that just because of that vaccine, the Rajpakshe, the president of Sri Lanka, which is on the tilted towards China, he himself come to the airport to receive the medicine, and he was really thankful to Indian authorities for the medicine. And immediately he has said no to China for the medicines and ordered 18 million doses of the Indian vaccine. So this is the positive sign, but still till date they have not said yes to India for the port projects in Colombo. And really we are hopeful that with the help of this vaccine diplomacy, India will be able to handle the situation with Sri Lanka also. So vaccination, this vaccine diplomacy is can be handy when we are talking of the Sri Lanka. And the third one is the Bangladesh. Bangladesh is a very important South Asian country, very important player in South Asia. And most of the time it used to play in the hands of China. It is again on the same pattern which other countries of the South Asia are doing. But recently, during this pandemic, China has asked the Bangladesh to contribute for the money with the money which the money which he has spent on the development of the medicine of the COVID. But when India showed Bangladesh that we will provide you the medicine without any cost, immediately Bangladesh refused to contribute for the development cost of the Chinese vaccine. And India has supplied 2 million doses of the medicine free of cost to Bangladesh. So now Bangladesh himself signed a deal with India with the 30 million doses of the COVID vaccine. So for the Bangladesh also, I am very much hopeful that this COVID diplomacy is going to work for India. As I have already said, that world is hopeful that the developing nations will get the vaccination in the next 3 years only. But India has played a very vital role in providing the vaccine to those developing countries. Especially, I will name Afghanistan, Mauritius, and Bhutan, Myanmar, and so Seychelles. There are so many countries which were provided the medicine under the Indian policy of neighborhood first policy. So this is going to be important for India, and especially with the help of the Serum Institute, which is really ensuring faster production and supply of medicine than expected, because no one is expecting that much of that production and supply of medicine at that high rate, which Serum Institute is providing to the world and to the India also. And especially it is easing out all the pressure. डाटा खत्म हो गया था उसका चलो Hello. So there was some interruption with the internet connectivity. Yeah. So this is all which I are supposed to say on the topic which was allotted to me, and I'm taking definitely it has spoiled our economy. We are facing a big challenge on the name of the COVID. But I'm hopeful that we will make this COVID an opportunity, and with the help of the our policy vaccine Maitri, to whom we are calling vaccine diplomacy, will help India in improving its relations with the other important nations of the country, especially in South Asia. So once again, I will end myself here, and I'm really thankful to the organizers for providing me this opportunity, and I hope and I wish this international webinar to be a great success, and all my best wishes are with the organizers for this webinar. Thank you very much for providing me this opportunity. Hope we will connect again some other time. Thank you so much.
For today's session, Dr. Margaret Marian Gover. Please let me introduce the speaker. She is Assistant Professor of Religious Studies and Theology at St. Mary's College, Indiana. Her teaching and research interests include Christian theology and spirituality, reform movements, interreligious dialogues, and gender. She has a PhD from Harvard University, Cambridge. Dr. Gover has presented and published many papers in conferences and talks. She has a long list of awards and fellowships to her name. Now, Dr. Margaret Marian Gover will talk on theology and religion, on the value of interdisciplinary research and critical thinking in humanities and social sciences.
Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be with you today. My name is Molly Gower, and I teach at St. Mary's College in Notre Dame, Indiana. At St. Mary's, I teach on the history of Christian theology in the Department of Religious Studies and Theology. And I'm delighted to be with you in this way here together today to talk about religious studies and theology. I'll begin by introducing the idea of studying religion from at least 3 different perspectives. My students and I sometimes talk together about the truth that if someone says to you, "I'm going to my religion class," they have not said an altogether specific thing, because there are so many different ways to approach the study of religion. There are 3 that I'll focus on today. The first is catechesis, the second is theology, and the third is religious studies. The first word that I've said, catechesis, has its roots in the Christian tradition. It's spelled Catechis. It sounds an awful lot like the word catechism, which is a book used in the process of catechesis. So the word catechesis comes from Greek for teaching. And in the Christian tradition, in the history of Christianity, in early Christianity, catechesis was used to refer to instruction, teaching, given to those preparing for baptism. So catechesis is the process of the learning, and catechism is a book that is used in this process. I've come to describe catechesis as education for formation, for participation. So catechesis is the instruction, the education offered to a person so that that person can be formed, can be constituted, can be made for meaningful engagement in a particular religious tradition. So in the early church, it was used for those preparing to join the Christian community, the church, through the initiation rituals of baptism. Nowadays, in the Christian tradition, the word is applied to many different kinds of instruction meant to educate a Christian person in order to deepen Christian faith so that that person may participate more meaningfully in the life of the church tradition. The word catechesis has its roots in the Christian tradition, and I've only ever heard the word catechesis used to describe this education for formation, for participation in a Christian context. But my sense is that every religion I have encountered has some kind of education for formation, for participation process, although it goes by different names in different traditions. I wish I were there with you so that we could talk about whether or not you agree that this is present in the religions that you encounter, the lived experiences of ritual or tradition or ethical reflection or faith commitments. So I'll let it be. I don't want to assert it as a firm thing that every religious tradition has this process, but in my experience, I found that to be so. I'm interested to hear what you all make of this. In the Christian tradition, especially in the Catholic tradition, which is my own, but in the Christian tradition in general, the catechism is this text used in this process. The catechism has a particular structure. It's set out as question and answer. So sometimes my students and I think about this process as setting out questions and setting out answers. Sort of the questions are given, and so too are the answers. This is because it's meant to help form people in a particular tradition. Now, catechesis is work that I participate in. I have taught sort of Sunday school and church school classes, especially for little ones. I have a whole crew of God kiddos. The children I have vowed to help form as Christian persons. I participate from time to time in the activities of campus ministry and other sort of catechesis, faith formation practices at the Catholic Women's College where I teach. But catechesis is not work that I bring into the classroom. First of all, even at a Catholic college, the work of forming people, constituting people for meaningful participation in my tradition is not the work that we do in the academic classroom space. Also, for my students and for me, the idea of doing the academic work, the intellectual scholarly project of religious studies or theology, the work of the college classroom in one way or another, does not offer both questions and answers, but helps train the students, helps train the participants, myself included, to ask questions and to through textual analysis or the methods and methodologies of the social sciences to pursue answers, not to just receive questions or to receive answers, but to form our own questions and to pursue our own answers. So both in the sort of end goal of catechesis, meaningful participation in a particular religious tradition, and in the methods and practices, catechesis is not work that I would ever feel comfortable doing in the context of a college or university classroom. The second kind of approach to the study of religion that I'd like to talk about today is theology. Theology. Theology comes from the root words God and logo. Theo is God and logi is logos, word, talk. The simplest definition of theology is God talk. This is the simplest definition, the most basic definition, the most direct definition, and it's the definition of theology that I prefer. Theology is talk about God. Within the Christian tradition, the tradition that I study and work on and know best, the Christian tradition defines theology in at least two important ways. One is offered to us by Anselm of Canterbury, a theologian who lived in England. He died in 1109. And even though he lived so long ago, his definition of theology remains the most enduring. Anselm of Canterbury said, theology is faith, seeking, understanding. Theology begins with faith, and it sets out to seek to pursue, to chase down understanding. Now, this enduring and important definition of theology begins with faith. And I don't know how the word faith will strike your ears. I wish I were there and we could talk about it. Maybe you can talk about it together. When you hear the word faith, I really wonder what associations the word faith conjures for you all. I'll tell you, in my own context, working with undergraduate students in Indiana, in the USA, faith, I would say 9 times out of 10, if I ask my students, what do you think of when you hear faith? They think belief. My students often think that faith means believing. Believing is a sort of saying yes to some propositional statement. To believe is to affirm some statement to be true, to assent, to say yes to some statement of belief. And belief does have a role to play in the definition of faith that Anselm of Canterbury had in mind when he set out this definition. Theology is faith seeking understanding. But for Anselm in the Middle Ages, and indeed in my own Christian tradition, in most of the history of Christianity, faith has been a much broader category. Faith has had a much bigger meaning, bigger definition than belief alone. So I'd like to take a moment in the context of thinking about theology, in the context of thinking about what faith-seeking understanding meant for Anselm and means for theologians, at least theologians working in the tradition I know, the Christian tradition, especially the Catholic tradition. I'd like to talk about the meaning of the word faith. And here I am indebted to the theologian and scholar of Jesus, Marcus Borg. Marcus Borg worked hard in his book, The Heart of Christianity, to emphasize that faith is about more than belief. He says faith is not just a head matter, a sort of intellectual concern. Borg emphasizes that faith is a matter of the head and even more a matter of the heart. He sort of mines the Christian tradition to set out 4 parts of the 4 pieces of what faith means. The first is just this, the assent, faith as assenting. He writes, this is faith as belief. That is, as giving one's mental assent to a proposition, as believing that a claim or statement is true. Okay. He says for Christians, being Christian means affirming the reality of God. Christian faith includes affirming the centrality of Jesus and the centrality of the Bible. Okay. Then he says there is also the part of faith that is about trust. Here he draws on the Latin word fiducia, and he says faith includes a kind of radical, basic trust. He says he's talking about the kind of faith as trust which casts out anxiety. Sometimes when I think of what this faith as fiducia, faith as trust means, I think of the line of scripture that talks about, of the Christian scripture, that talks about God is the one in whom I live and move and have my being. A sort of holistic sense of being known and cared for by the one who created. Sometimes when my students and I try to sort of get our mind around what all this means, we think about almost lying on water or letting one's body be caught by a wave. You know, this sort of trust that one can let go and sort of fall into the ocean and be caught by the waves and the water and float, not sink. The third aspect of faith that Marcus Borg describes, the third meaning of the word faith, is faith as he puts it, fidelitas. Here he says he's describing faith as fidelity or faith as faithfulness. He says a third part of faith involves relationship. He thinks that it's relationship with God in particular. He talks about this faith as fidelitas, as meaning loyalty, allegiance, the commitment of the self at its deepest level, the commitment of the heart. He thinks that in the culture, in the USA culture in which he's writing and for whom he's writing, he thinks that it's a pity that we've come to think of fidelity or faithfulness as primarily to a sort of spouse or a partner. This is good, but he thinks there are other relationships that make these claims of fidelity or faithfulness on us too. He thinks that there's an importance in affirming a sort of steadfastness of relationship. Borg would say to God, other theologians could say to the conversation that is the theological tradition, to the community of co-religionists, worshipers, believers, practitioners. Other people would say to the scriptural texts. I think we can, but Borg emphasizes this fidelity of relationship to God. The fourth piece of faith that Marcus Borg lifts up is visio, V-I-S-I-O, vision or way of seeing. Marcus Borg describes faith as a kind of paradigm or worldview, a kind of lens on the whole. He says faith is a way of seeing the whole. Faith is a way of seeing what is. He concludes this section by saying, in the end, informed by the pre-modern meaning of believe, this more expansive sense, he writes, to believe in God is to beloved God. Faith is about believing, but also offering love or beloving God and all that God beloves. The Christian life, Marcus Borg goes on, the Christian life is about beloving God and all that God beloves. Faith is our love for God. Faith is the way of the heart. So with this expanded sense of faith in mind, I'd like to return to Anselm of Canterbury's notion that theology is faith seeking understanding. I think we can sort of sum up these different aspects of faith that Marcus Borg sets out by describing faith for Anselm as commitment. For Anselm of Canterbury, theology begins with commitment. Commitment to the ongoing conversation, commitment to the history of this religion. I sometimes feel committed to the history of my religion, committed to the ancestors, to the ones who came before, to the ones whose lives were made meaningful and holy, maybe even meaningful and good, maybe even holy by their practices. So theology begins with commitment, maybe to history, maybe to text, maybe to questions, maybe to community, maybe to practices, maybe to God. This is sort of where Marcus Borg takes us. So for Anselm of Canterbury, theology begins with faith. And faith in this sense seems to mean commitment, one way or another. For Anselm, theology is faith that seeks, that searches out, that looks for, that pursues. For me, I think this seeking may be the most important of these three words. Theology is commitment seeking. And the reason seeking matters so much for me is because of that ing, that gerund form. Faith is seeking, and the seeking is ongoing. The seeking is an ongoing process. The search is not over. I'm talking a lot about my students because I'm trying to imagine a sort of folks with whom I'm in a room. And I'm thinking oftentimes my students think of theology as something that has been done, as something that people did once and no longer do. Sometimes my students seem to think of theology as something kind of dusty, sort of some old tomes on a shelf, maybe something done by Thomas Aquinas or somebody else in the Middle Ages. Sometimes my students care a lot that theology is done because they're interested in theology being something settled. Seems to me that theology is seeking, and that ongoing process matters enormously, because when the process ends, the conversation is over, the seeking has ceased. I think that's the end of the vitality of the religious tradition. I think that's when a religion seeks to be meaning-making, to be life-giving and good for the people in it. I think it's the end of that religion. Theology is ongoing when it has life, when it has vitality, when it has vigor and activity. And the way, in my experience, what the seeking looks like is people standing within their religious tradition, so to speak, placing themselves within their religious tradition, within their theological tradition, beginning from a place of commitment, learning from history and scripture, and looking around the world at the reading. Sometimes Christians talk about reading the signs of the times, sort of looking around and saying, what are the urgent questions? What are the urgent challenges, the urgent problems of our day? And what do these scriptures and these teachings and these traditions and this history, what does it have to say to the urgent needs of our day? And in that way, the seeking goes on. Tradition is the word for handing down. Tradition is that which is handed down or passed on. And so part of the seeking includes the present generation receiving what has been handed down, sort of reworking it, making it relevant for their moment, perhaps saying ancient things, but in new ways, passing it down for themselves to the next generation. So for Anselm, theology is faith, which I'm suggesting we can think of as commitment, seeking, the sort of ongoing process of forming questions and working hard to set out answers that are life-giving and good. Faith is seeking understanding. In other words, understanding is that which this process is moving toward. Understanding could mean a lot of different things in this context. Understanding could mean some sort of truth or ultimate. Understanding could mean something that stands outside of the contingencies of time. Understanding could mean God, something eternal, something ultimate, something enduring. It could mean sort of the wisdom. It could mean wisdom. It could mean love. But faith is trying to move toward something true and to grow in deeper understanding of it. Now, for Thomas Aquinas, he died in 1274. For Thomas Aquinas, theology meant something closer to the study of God and all things, each on its own and all things all together in relationship to God. This is why theologians sometimes seem sort of to have a shocking lack of humility in the scope of their project. For some theologians, it's not enough to try to do God talk alone. More than God talk. We want to talk about all things, each in relationship to God. For these reasons, at least in my Christian tradition, theology must always be a work of seeking. It never reaches final answers or definitive insights. At least that's not the goal, because the goal is to keep this sort of ongoing, intergenerational conversation about what matters most alive. If you have the last word in theology, you have not sort of settled it. You have not unraveled the mysteries of the ultimate, the mysteries of the divine. But you've sort of something about the urgency and vitality of the questions you've been asking together has been zapped. The point isn't to settle it. The point isn't to finish it. The point is to help it grow more true, more life-giving, more good, and to hand it down as something helpful to another generation of folks. So for Christians, because God is divine mystery, theology will never settle it, but can only hope to grow nearer to it. When you do theology, in my experience, you stand within a particular religious tradition, which is a kind of worldview, and includes starting points and basic assumptions. The theologian places themselves within the religious tradition, stands committed to it. The nature of that commitment might change. The commitment might be to ancestors or family or practices or tradition or God or community or ethics. Or I think I've seen many times that it shifts. But this is the work of theology, to stand within, to be committed to ask questions of the religion and the world, and to try to seek understanding, to try to grow nearer to things that are true. Now, in my experience, sometimes the people who most urgently want their religions to change are those most committed people, Sometimes the people who are the most rooted within a theological tradition, the handing down of God talk done by one particular religion or another. Sometimes those are the folks who, their sort of care to make and remake the conversation grows up out of their commitment to that religion. To care a lot, in my experience, is to be committed to. So these are some pieces of theology as God talk. Now, the third way of doing religion that I'd like to talk about today is religious studies. A person doing theology according to religious studies may be placed, may be positioned within a particular religious tradition, but doesn't need to be. I do catechesis, I mentioned, but not in the college classroom. I do theology, sometimes in the college classroom, and I'm invested in the project of Christian Talk About God. I also do religious studies. Speaking for myself, sometimes I'm a Christian person studying Christianity from the point of view of religious studies. Sometimes I'm a Christian person learning about other religious traditions from the perspectives of religious studies. When we do religious studies, we may or may not be adherents of, believers in, participants in the religion that's under scholarly consideration. Rather, when we do religious studies, we place ourselves in a critical relationship to tradition. The work of the scholar of religion, the work of the person doing religious studies, is to ask questions, of course, and to work to make explicit those things that are implicit for insiders. When I say insider, I mean people who live and think within a particular religious tradition, even people who have come to be formed by that particular religious tradition. In other words, when we do religious studies, we work to spell out, to say directly, and then to think about these things which insiders might take for granted. Now, I said that religious studies is about placing oneself in a critical relationship to a religion. When I say that it is critical, I do not mean like criticizing. You know, sometimes my students think that I'm inviting them to be somehow nasty or hostile or trying to tear down or debunk, but that's not at all what I mean. I don't mean criticizing. I mean critical in the sense of exercising or involving careful judgment and judicious evaluation. In other words, I mean being precise. Excuse me. It's spring has sprung in South Bend, Indiana. There's all kinds of blooming things in the air. So when I mean critical, I mean exerting ourselves to say things that are specific, that are precise, that are careful, that we can support using the evidence of text or social science or history. I mean trying to exert ourselves to get it to be as accurate and as precise in our descriptions as possible. In the study of religion in particular, this sometimes means training ourselves out of the habit of making general statements. Sometimes to do this work of being critical, to do the work of getting it right in things as complicated and as diverse within themselves as a particular religion, we just have to be content to make a smaller statement because we can only support smaller statements sometimes in the study of religion. So when I mean critical, when I say critical in this sense, I mean involving careful judgment, keen observation, being exact and accurate and precise. In other words, in the study of religion, we do our best to think really well and try to get it right. Even to describe a religious tradition, maybe some part of a text or some activity of prayer or a pilgrimage or a ritual or a song, to describe it so well and so specifically that perhaps even as an outsider, I have brought to the fore and been explicit in my observation of some things that an insider had never noticed or never considered, had taken for granted. But that I, as an outsider, even if I'm an outsider to my own religious tradition, I'm trying to get outside of my paradigm, to sort of see more, not assume it, not take it for granted, but say it directly and think about what it means. So it involves a lot of description and a lot of careful interpretation and analysis. The next characteristic commitment of religious studies. So the first characteristic commitment of religious studies is to be critical. The second characteristic commitment of religious studies is to be empathic, to offer empathy. So in this case, I think empathy involves, first of all, refusing under any circumstances to call something superstitious or to call a tradition or persons in a tradition backwards or brainwashed or old-fashioned or ridiculous, or somehow to put down people for seeing the world differently and making meaning differently, for being in the world differently, even if those people are really long ago or really far away, to try to honor their humanity and to say, what is this person doing and what does it mean for them? So this means approaching the subject of study with an open mind, which includes the possibility of leaving the learning situation changed, having been changed ourselves by new knowledge. Here also, empathy involves a kind of imaginative entering into the environment of the phenomenon or the persons being studied. Of course, we cannot become insiders for each religion that we might study, but I think that we can and should try to understand and appreciate why insiders feel compelled by their views and their practices. Empathy requires that even people who seem really different from us, long ago or far away folks, empathy requires us to acknowledge that they are nevertheless really, truly, fully human, just as we are. These people who seem so different or lived so long ago or so far away are human persons asking the same kinds of questions that we ask, and they are not crazy or ridiculous if they answer the questions in ways that are different than our answers. Of course, the practice of empathy does not mean that we must agree with or approve of the point of view being studied. Here is the key. In religious studies, the point is understanding, not agreeing. Sometimes this can be very difficult for my students because sometimes human persons, we sort of want to measure, we want to understand or respond to or measure and evaluate the ideas that we encounter by the extent to which they align with the ideas that we hold. But this just isn't what religious studies is about. It's not the project. The project isn't to measure every idea I encounter according to myself, but rather to let that idea or that practice be itself and to try to describe and explain it so that we can understand it. So, in the end, religious studies is not instruction about what you or my students should do or what you or my students should believe. Religious studies is about learning information about religious views and behaviors. I think ideally it's learning that leaves us as scholars open to the possibility that we may be changed. And one challenge before the person doing religious studies is to be both critical and empathic in approaching the religious traditions that are being studied. Now I see I'm moving toward the end of my time, so I'll be brief in the next things that I'd like to share with you. The first is I'd like to offer 5 theological notions. In other words, my students and I, when we begin learning about a religious tradition, we sometimes ask these 5 questions first, and they help us. I wish, again, that we were together because I think that these questions might be very useful in some religions, in learning about some religions. I think other questions might be better for learning about others, but I'll offer you the 5 questions that have helped my students and me begin to learn about religions. Here are 5 theological notions that I'll set out as questions. Number 1, what is the theological notion of God or gods, the divine, or the ultimate in this religion? Does this religion have a notion of God or gods? What is it? What are they? Number 2, is there an idea of revelation in this religious tradition? Revelation can mean sort of that which is revealed, that which is disclosed, that which is taught. I mostly work on, Christianity above all, and in a secondary and tertiary way on Judaism and Islam. So in these religions, when we talk about what is revelation, we sort of say, how does God reveal? How does God reveal God's self? How does God teach? How does God disclose about God's self? I wonder in other religions, is there a notion of revelation? Is there a notion of the divine, the ultimate, making known? What is made known? How is it made known? To whom is it made known? Where is this knowledge stored? How can future, later generations of people access it? All I'm doing now is offering constellations of questions. I think they're helpful places to begin. Third, what is the idea of the human person at work in this religion? In other words, what does this religion say about what a human being is? Is a human being an animal? Is a human being somehow different from other animals? How is a human being the same as creatures? Or that's a very sort of Judeo-Christian and Islamic way of thinking about it, creature and creator. How is the human being like other beings? How is the human being different? What are the capacities of a human being? What are the limitations of a human being? What kinds of diversity amongst and between human beings are there? What does it mean? Why do those diversities, those differences, which ones have meaning? Which ones matter? Fourth, what is the notion of community at work in this religion? Now, I don't mean, I'm not trying to say community like, how does this religion think about bunches of people? Maybe this could be a family or a school or something like that. I mean, instead, how does this religion think of itself as a religion? Or does it? Does the religion do that? So to make it a little bit more concrete, I don't want to be too vague and lose you. Maybe I would say, for instance, in my own Christian tradition, Christian people have named themselves church. So how does the Christian tradition talk about what the church is and what it means for the Christian persons to be church? So too for other religions. For Judaism, we could say the many Jewish folks think about the sort of name themselves the chosen people. What does this mean, the idea that the Jewish people are the chosen people? What does that mean? What does it mean for, what does Judaism think it means to be the Jewish people, to be the Jewish community? What does the Christian community think about what it means to be the community of Christian persons? Fifth, what is the notion of the good life contained within this religion or offered by this religion? What is a good life? What constitutes a good life? Who can have a good life? What do you do to get a good life? My students often want to think about the afterlife too, so I didn't put that on my list, but we could add that as a sixth. Does this religion talk about death? If this religion talks about death, what does it say? Now I'd like to close with a quote from a classic in the study of religion, Houston Smith's The World's Religions. It was originally published in 1958. I think that the first title might have been The Religions of Man. It's been edited in fits and starts throughout the years. I think it is a classic, and I think it endures. And it was written in 1958, and some of it would be very different if it were written today. But this is the second to last. This is at the very end of the introduction. Houston Smith writes, "We are about to begin a voyage in space and time and eternity. The places will often be distant, the times remote, the themes beyond space and time altogether. We shall have to use words that are foreign," and then he gives examples, Sanskrit, Chinese, and Arabic. "We shall try to describe states of consciousness that words can only hint at. We shall use logic to try to corner insights that laugh at our attempt. And ultimately, we shall fail. Being ourselves of a different cast of mind, we shall never quite understand the religions that are not our own. But if we take those religions seriously, we need not fail miserably. And to take them seriously, we need to do only two things. First, we need to see their adherents as men and women who faced problems much like our own. And second, we must rid our minds of all preconceptions that could dull our sensitivity or alertness to fresh insights. If we lay aside our preconceptions about these religions, seeing each as forged by people who were struggling to see something that would give help and meaning to their lives, if we then try without prejudice to see ourselves what they saw, if we do these things, the veil that separates us from them can turn to gauze. So, my wish for you is my wish for me. May we not fail miserably. Thank you very much for this time. It's been an honor to join you today.
Speech will be delivered. Please let me introduce the speaker, Dr. Shailendra Devulankar. He is the director of Government Pre-IAS Training Institute, Amravati, and Associate Professor, Government Vidarbha Institute of Science and Humanities, Amravati. He has 25 academic awards and scholarships to his name. Dr. Devulankar has published 16 books and edited 8 other books. He has published papers and articles in many journals and has published 150 articles in newspapers and magazines. He has also worked as the principal correspondent for Zee News and as a news anchor for Zee News Marathi. This is Dr. Shailendra Devulankar who will give his lecture.
Shailendra Devulankar. I am presently working as an associate professor in the postgraduate department of Government Vidarbha Institute of Science and Humanities, Amravati. At the outset, let me congratulate the Political Science Department of Tuljaram Chaturchand College, Baramati, for timely organizing an international conference on a very important topic, namely the importance of interdisciplinary research and post-COVID world system. I think this is a very important topic, and this topic is being discussed uh, among the academic sections across the world. I mean, I have come across several important seminars and conferences at the very important universities in America also and in Europe also, where this type of discussions are now, it has commenced, because this is the high time that we need to discuss the post-COVID international order. Why we need to discuss this post-COVID and why it is appropriate to term it as a post-COVID world order, and this is the new world order, because the well-known diplomat and scholar on international relations, Mr. Henry Kissinger, has very rightly observed that the corona pandemic has immensely impacted the world order. It has altered the world order. And now it will be appropriate to call now the pre-COVID world order and post-COVID world order. Although the corona crisis emerged as a medical emergency or crisis, it has impacted almost every section of human life. It has impacted the economy, it has disrupted the world supply chain, it has impacted politically, it has impacted society. So it has touched upon almost every section of the human life. So it is very appropriate to discuss at the spur of moment the importance that what type of order is being emerged in this post-COVID world order. In fact, I have confined myself to, I mean, this is a very broad topic, as I observed earlier, that it has impacted almost every section of human life. I confined myself that how it has impacted on the issue or concept of national security, and I mean, I will discuss that matter very briefly, and then in fact I will insist or focus on India, how it has impacted on India and India's national security, and what are the opportunities it has offered to world also in general, and to India in particular. So I think that Corona has impacted very deeply to the concept of national security. It has altered the concept of national security. It has broadened the concept of national security. Rather, I would say that earlier the concept of national security and more nation state used to emphasis on the physical security of the nation state. They used to protect their borders. Their military infrastructure used to be developed in such a way to protect their borders only. But now the corona crisis has really broadened the term national security. Now it has encompassed not only the external security, it has also insisting on the internal security, the human security aspect. Now in the post-COVID world order, the aspect of human security has become a very center stage, and that has become very important. I mean, this has been the agenda at the global level also. In 2012, the United Nations General Assembly called for, there was a universal appeal for the human security. And the human security includes almost all. I mean, that's the economic security, food security, it's health security. And there are multiple aspects that also includes in it. So the post-COVID world order, I mean, the national concept of national security has undergone a tremendous change. And now it has become broad to cover multiple aspects. Now it has become truly a interdisciplinary subject. Right now, I mean, as your conference is also titled, that's the interdisciplinary research in the post-COVID world system. I mean, now the concept of national security has really become interdisciplinary. In fact, the corona crisis itself is an interdisciplinary subject. Now, it is not just confined to the medical sciences. Okay, so since it has impacted the economy, it has impacted the society. So it is a high time that the social scientists and the scientists needs to sit together across the table and deliberate on how we can overcome this crisis also. I mean, during this Corona crisis, I mean, there were some instances where the scientists of the world they came together immediately. I mean, if you compare it to the national leaders, I mean, the scientists came together. I mean, they deliberated on this matter. I mean, there was a collaboration in case of developing the vaccine to counter the corona crisis also. So, I mean, this is another very positive side of corona, and it has created a type of example that during the crisis, how the world scientist has come together and how, in a collaborative way, they developed the vaccine on corona also. So when we look at this issue from the Indian perspective, the issue of national security in this post-COVID world order, I think there are four immediate concerns. I mean that rather I would focus from the India's national security perspective. That is the first is obvious. That is the China challenge. That's an immediate elephant in the room, and that we need to discuss. The second, from the Indian national security perspective, is our defense dependence or defense vulnerabilities, which was also came forth during this China crisis. That also I will discuss in brief. And then the data security. Now, this is a very new type of concept which is coming up in the post-COVID world order, how data has become so important and how India has become concerned as far as protecting the data is related. And then the material security, the last aspect which I'm going to discuss, that material security which has emanated from disrupting the global supply chain and how it has really impacted on the material security of India. I mean, as we were also dependent on several other countries for raw material also. So, I mean, this whole entire supply chain got disturbed, and it has also impacted on India's, trade globally also, and India's internal manufacturing potential. So, I'm also going to discuss that. And at the fact end, how this Corona crisis has proved as a blessing in disguise also. I mean, how it has offered India some opportunities which India can capitalize, and India can, on the basis of that, how India can emerge in at least in some sections as a global leader. I mean, this type of indications are already started coming that very recently the United Nations Secretary General has commented that in the field of corona vaccine, that India's the generous approach has already helped India to develop or to emerge as a world leader in the section of health diplomacy. In the same way, we very recently concluded the formal summit of the Quad national heads. I mean, the very important decision which was taken in the second formal national head meeting of the Quad leaders. I mean that the Quad will provide almost 1 billion vaccine doses to the almost 145 nations across the Asia Pacific, and the responsibility has been specifically given to India that India will manufacture this corona vaccine and will supply. So India is going to emerge as a manufacturing hub in the health section. So India has an immense opportunity. So how Atmanirbhar Bharat concept, which has been now it is taking momentum in India, and the Prime Minister, when he declared the package, to 20 lakh crore package on this corona vaccine, at that time he appealed on this Atmanirbhar concept, and how this has taken momentum, how the government is also supporting this Atmanirbhar concept, and how India can in future can replace China. I mean, this is a little bit ambitious statement which I'm making, but the day is not far when if India develop itself in a proper, appropriate manner. I mean, the day is not long when India can even, emerge as a substitute or as an alternative to China also. I mean, and can become a very important part of global supply chain. So that is also I'm going to very briefly discuss at the back end of my my presentation. The first aspect being the China challenge. I mean, the post-COVID world order. In fact, the challenge of China has really, as I earlier, explained, as an immediate, it's an immediate elephant in the room. So that is a very important challenge. In fact, India's development of India's national security, or even the development of India's defense infrastructure, it was actually based on to counter the Pakistan challenge. In fact, most of our defense infrastructure has been developed on that line. But the China challenge has really, make us to realize the importance of protecting our northern borders also. In fact, we need to focus more on that aspect because due to this China challenge, which has been going on, the border challenge or border conflict with China, which has been going on since last 8 to 9 months. So this is again an important, challenge that India needs to take into consideration. While countering the China challenge, I mean China's territorial expansionism that has been witnessed in the eastern Ladakh, and now even in the near Arunachal Pradesh also, and even Sikkim also, China is trying to, exhibit its power. So this is a grand strategy of China, and I mean I will not go into that detail because that's a totally different subject. But now, from the Indian national security perspective, India needs to very seriously dwell into think from the perspective of countering the China challenge. And I mean, that clearly exhibited since last 8 to 9 months our defense dependence. I mean, when our problem with China was on the at the top level, or even the Galwan crisis was after the Galwan crisis, when there was a possibility of direct conflict with China, almost both the India and China were at eyes to eye, and there was, I mean, any time the war could have been, broke out. At that time, our defense minister, central defense minister, Rajnath Singh, twice visited Russia. At that time, I mean, therefore, he had some agreements with Russia to procure some important defense equipments from Russia. So at that time, that also exhibited India's defense dependence, because as I earlier pointed out that India developed its defense infrastructure while considering Pakistan in view. Okay, so now while considering China, we need to focus on the new procurement as far as the China is concerned, and that is how we are focusing. So that's the reason why the Central Defense Minister Rajnath Singh twice visited Russia, and he had some defense agreement with Russia also. So that shows our defense vulnerabilities that we need to overcome in the coming time, and that is, I think, a very important challenge before India in the post-COVID world order. Then the data security, I mean, that has, as I pointed out earlier, this has again emerged as a very important topic. Like in the 20th century, the entire world politics was centered around the oil, and the oil was a very prominent, issue. And there were several conflicts, the large or big, large or small conflicts. I mean, that took place, and it were directly or indirectly influenced by the oil politics. In the 21st century, now the data has emerged as a new oil. Okay, like in 20th century, oil was a center point. In the 21st century, data has emerged as a new oil. I mean, and the country which will be considered most powerful, which has the control over the data. So the big countries like America, Russia, China especially, they're trying to, monopolize the data. And in fact, the Chinese companies, in fact, they are also acting as a part of or as an instrument of China's defense and foreign policy. They are trying to, gather, mobilize this data, and and they are handing it over to the Chinese government and the Chinese Defense Department also. And there are several examples. I mean, that can we can prove this line that how the Chinese companies are trying to get this data and transferring it to the Chinese government. That's the reason why since last 5 to 6 months, the Indian government has decided to ban Chinese mobile apps. In fact, we have banned the Chinese TikTok. This is a very most popular, mobile app in India. And in fact, the Indian government is also seriously thinking over, banning the Chinese telecom companies also. In fact, the Chinese telecom giant Huawei and ZTE, it has already been banned in America and in even several countries in the Europe also. So now there are more than 12 nations which has banned this Chinese telecom giant Huawei. And now there is a pressure on the Indian government also that in India, I mean, we have allowed Huawei to participate in the 5G testing in India in 2018. So now the Indian government is also seriously rethinking or allotting this contract to the China. And during last few months, I mean, in several departments in the central government, I mean, in several tender process, the Chinese companies, they have been, barred from participating in the tender process also. So this is a very important, step by the Indian government. In fact, it was a very daring stage, or I mean, I guess very bold stage. In fact, even America took the decision to ban the TikTok after 5 months when India took the decision. So it was not possible even for America, I mean, the most powerful nation, and now they have the type of animosity with China. Even after that also, I mean, they were not, in a position to ban the TikTok almost for 6 months, even after 5 to 6 months, even after India banned the TikTok. But India shown this courage, and after that, I mean, there are several nations came forth, and now some openly, like Australia, even in the England also, I mean, for that matter. So India has now realized the importance of data security. So now this is again an important challenge before Indian government, that in the post-COVID world order, we need to think how India can protect the vital data. I mean, there are a couple of bills which has been pending now in the parliament. I think this is the high time that we need to develop the consensus of this issue and immediately enact it so that our vital data will be protected in coming time. So that, I mean, this type of the FDI, the foreign direct investment, which is coming from China, I mean, we need to restrict that also. Of course, I mean, this is we have a red carpet for FDI. Now we are the FDI starved country. We are looking for more and more FDI in several of our fields. But at the same time, we need to look into the matter that this FDI, I mean, should not act as an instrument in some countries' hand, that they will, try to get the Indian vital data or try to monopolize our industries. So that we need to take into consideration, and that's the reason why the central government took the decision that they will scan the FDI which is coming from the neighboring countries of India, including China also. And before that, the China used to the FDI from China used to come directly, without any inhibitions from the central government now. But every proposal at the spur of moment is being scanned at the home ministry level. And there are more than 300 proposals which has been stalled at the present, or which is in the process of scanning at the moment at the central government or at the home ministry level. So this is a very important, this has given the very strong message to China. Now India has really changed its strategy. And then finally, it's a material security. And now this is a very important aspect that the corona has deeply impacted the world supply chain. Immediately after the corona, the nations closed down their borders, and the liberal institutionalism, which was very prominent in the aftermath of the Second World War, and which really shaped the process of globalization, the liberal institutionalism, and under which there are several liberal organizations which has come up, international organizations which came up in the process, even the trade blocs also, and they really took forward the agenda of globalization. But all this liberal institutionalism came under severe criticism, also crisis during this corona pandemic, because hardly any international organization played a crucial role during this corona crisis. I mean, that's a very important development that we have witnessed in this post-corona system. That the regional trade blocs or even the regional organization, the international organization, I mean, their role was very negligible. I mean, there were a couple of meetings of G7 group, G20 groups, and even the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in fact, he took the initiative in case of SARC, and then he called a meeting of SARC head of the states, and then he contributed the $10 million fund for this to fight the COVID pandemic. I mean, as far as the SARC is concerned. But other than that, I mean, there was no major development, no major cooperation at the international level through this international organization. Material security, in fact, the entire corona crisis has deeply impacted the material security. In case of India, India is also dependent on China for its raw material. If you take the example or one important sector like pharmaceutical. Almost, for our pharmaceutical requires, for any pharmaceutical industry, you require two important, starting ingredients. That is, first is API, that is the active pharmaceutical ingredients, and the key starting factors. So for API also, we are immensely dependent on China, and that has been witnessed during this Corona crisis. And that in fact forced India to start its own manufacturing. Last year, 2019, before the Corona pandemic, we imported worth 5 billion API from China. That is 53 APIs from China. But recently, after this Corona crisis, the central government has declared a policy of almost $927 million in the month of March, and now we are encouraging our domestic industrialists to start the plants for API, to start producing the API. And now the government is trying to create the API parks in the industrial corridors or industrial parks, and now they are giving the emoluments or loans for that matter. They are encouraging. There are the policies which has been declared in the month of March. So in case of pharmaceutical, also almost 70% of India's pharmaceutical industry is dependent on China. So even during the Corona crisis, what the type of vitamins we are using, the vitamin A, B, C, D, or multivitamins, most of the API for these multivitamins or that we all procure it from China. India is not the only example. Even in case of America also, the Americas, I can cite you some important examples, like the American national flag, which has been 100% being manufactured in India. Even the Diet Coke, unless China supplies the important ingredients of Diet Coke, the America cannot produce the Diet Coke, which is very popular in Europe and America. Even the Apple phone or Microsoft computers, for most of the things, the Europe and America, they were dependent on China, because China systematically developed itself in the last 10 decades that the world will depend on them. So China developed, and China became a very important part of the supply chain. During the 2003 SARS crisis, the China's contribution to the world GDP was only 8%. So that time, the world did not realize the impact of disrupting the supply chain. But this time, China's contribution to the world GDP is almost 22%. So it has deeply impacted the world supply chain. So now it has forced the nations either to think for the alternative or start producing on its own. Okay, so now this is new thought in India. How can India become a substitute to China as far as the world supply chain is concerned? In fact, America and the European nations are looking at India as an alternative to China. Okay, now the Apple has already started producing their smartphones in India. The Samsung has also has its plant in the Noida in Uttar Pradesh. There are some shoemaking company which is shifting to India. The Indian, even the garment business, India is receiving the huge contacts. Even in case of Corona also, at that time, India used to import the mask also and the PPE kits. But now India has become the world's largest producer of the PPE kits and even the mask also. So it has really changed. The situation has forced India to carve his own strategy. And that's the reason why Atmanirbhar concept has become very popular. And now we need to produce it. In fact, it will take time, because China miracle of manufacturing, how China has converted itself into a manufacturing hub, it is not a sudden development. Okay, China has systematically developed itself in the last 3 decades. In fact, China was the first communist country which embraced capitalism almost 10 years earlier than India. India embraced capitalism, or India, embarked on the path of economic liberalization in 1991. But China did it in 1981, almost 10 years earlier than India. And as far as this cycle of economic liberalization is concerned, it normally takes almost 3 decades to get it matured. When China started its economic liberalization in 1981, it got matured in 2011, and after that, China has come forth as a manufacturing hub of world. Now, India's time will definitely come. Okay, now we have already set the target of 5 trillion economy, and for that, India needs to develop the economy GDP growth rate is almost 10 to 11%, but this may not be possible due to this corona crisis. But of course, I mean, India has the young manpower. India is considered as the youngest nation in the world, and now the type of the Atmanirbhar concept, which has really getting momentum in India, the Make in India, Startup India, Clean Up India. There are flagship programs of central government which are taking momentum. Even in case of defense also, as India is considered as Asia's largest importer, now we are slowly trying to get away from this image, and we are trying to produce in fact our own equipments. We have declared the list of almost 100 items that we will not import it from abroad. And now India started producing its own submarines also, satellites also, even missiles also. And India, there are demands from the other countries to supply the missiles also, submarines also. So India can enter into the market of defense, I mean, maybe in the days ahead. So this corona crisis has again offered India an opportunity also at the same time. So that how India can capitalize this opportunity, because now the China is going through the credibility crisis. Now the world is no longer going to trust China, okay, because China has not observed any transparency during the corona crisis. In fact, China hid the vital information, not only from the WHO, from across the world also. And the type of behavior China had throughout this last 1 year, as far as the corona crisis, the emergence and proliferation of corona crisis is concerned, the entire Chinese behavior was highly suspicious. And that's the reason China is going through the credibility crisis. I mean, there are more than 1,000 companies which has already left, multinational corporations left China and relocated elsewhere. In fact, Japan has declared almost a $3 billion package for Japanese companies that they should come out from China and relocate somewhere else. So India can capitalize this opportunity. But India need to transform its internal, system, and that's very important. In fact, in India, doing business with ease. I mean, our rank was almost 142. Now we have come down to 64. And the Prime Minister's dream is to India to become in top 50. Maybe, I mean, that dream is also not far. Probably in the next couple of years, we will come in top 50 also. But as far as the land acquisition bill is concerned, as far as giving the permissions are concerned, I mean, India need to be more and more flexible as far as these approaches are concerned, and how we can capitalize. So in the post-COVID world order, of course, I mean, the issue of national security has become very important. But at the same time, it has, if you go through the Indian perspective, it has offered some opportunities also. So now we need to see that in the coming days, how India capitalize it. And it depends on that, whether India will be able to replace China or not, or whether India will be able to emerge as a substitute to China or not. That the time will, of course, I mean, that will decide and will show us. But of course, I mean, this is India which can really capitalize this opportunity which has been offered to India in this post-COVID scenario. So thank you very much that I have been given this time, and in fact, I confined myself to the issue of national security and the post-COVID system. I once again congratulate the postgraduate department of this Tuljaram Chaturchand College of Baramati that they have organized this conference on a very important topic. And I mean, this type of discussion needs to be taken place at the platform of academic platform of Indian colleges and universities also, so that I mean, we can exchange the thoughts on this very important issue. I hope that, I mean, this will convert into a summer policy document, and which can provide it to the government for some policy insights also. And I hope that this presentation will also enlighten the masses, I mean, which will provide them some information. Thank you very much once again.
And now I, Professor Sandesh Rathod, would like to propose a vote of thanks for this entire international webinar. The webinar has been a real success because of all the illustrious and learned speakers, and I would love to begin by thanking them. The first speaker, Dr. Mugdha Yevlekar, spoke on what is religious studies, relevance of religious studies in humanities and social sciences. Then Dr. Swasti Bhattacharya spoke on Vinoba Bhave, Sarvodaya and Cultural Humility, Religious Studies and Ethics. Then the third speaker, Dr. Niranjan Kaur Khalsa Baker, spoke on teaching Sikhism and Jainism, ethnographic and engaged learning approaches to religious studies. The fourth speaker, Dr. Margaret Marian Gower, spoke on theology and religion, on the value of interdisciplinary research and critical thinking in humanities and social sciences. For the second session, Dr. Manish Dabhade spoke on the COVID effect. Then Dr. Jagmeet Bawa spoke on post-COVID world, a roadmap for the foreign policy. The last speaker was Dr. Shailendra Devulankar. This webinar will be a positive roadmap for the future and our lives in a post-COVID world. Next, I would like to thank Dr. Phatak, the HOD and Organizing Secretary of the webinar. I thank his colleagues, Dr. Manke, who was the coordinator, and I thank Professor Raju Pandey. A very special thanks is for Dr. Chandrasekhar Murumkar, the principal and convener of this webinar. I thank all the vice principals, Dr. Jagtap, Dr. Telve, Dr. Deshpande, Dr. Sapkar, Dr. Mule, and Dr. Gosavi. I thank the registrar, Shri Abhinandan Shaha, all the teaching and non-teaching staff of the college, for giving their patient ears and hearts for this webinar. I thank all the participants and students with a deep gratitude. For all the people who were connected with this webinar in one way or the other, I extend a thanks on behalf of the college. And with this last sentence, I declare the international webinar as over. Thank you. Namaste.